is to gather and sell the company's assets and distribute the proceeds to creditors and shareholders. So, Melusi, I'm going to come back to you as we're talking about understanding the liquidation process in South Africa and talk about what that process involves. Natasha was talking about how thorough the process was in the example that she gave, scraping through, finding out what assets exist within the business itself, but then also in the personal capacity of those who were being investigated. So talk to us about that process, Melusi.
The process also, I would like to go back to what Natasha spoke about, the insolvent spouse. So if you are married, I think it's a very important point that Natasha said. If you are married in terms of property, all your assets will be joint. It's obvious it's one joint estate, and you would be both affected.
Yeah.
So that is just showing us that when you get into business, it's important to check what kind of marriage regime you'll marry into. If it's a house of commons of property, you won't be affected in this process. Now, back to the question. Look, the process, as Natasha said, it's not a short process. It's very long, and it involves getting all the information that can be obtained. And it's obviously as the master of high court. It's not in the magistrate court or in the high court or in the regional court. It's the master of high court that deals with estates. So there will be a process of what they call a liquidation process where a sequestration order will be made, but it will not be a permanent one. There will be, obviously, you'll be given an opportunity to oppose. So if you oppose, then it will be more tedious and so forth. But if you're not opposing, a final sequestration will be made where the liquidator will then be appointed to get all your assets. So all I'm saying, maybe I'm just repeating myself, but I'm saying that if possible that you are in this process, try and find a way where your attorneys or legal representative can just try to make a settlement agreement, because I'm just concerned that once you get under this process, you'll be affected in terms of your employment or in terms of getting to business in the future, because once this process starts, it's going to be you being insolvent for 10 years.
So do everything you can to avoid liquidation. Let's speak to Charlie in Boksburg. You've got quite an interesting question to ask. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, and you?
Good, thank you.
Go ahead.
My question was, in case of landlord's rights, so I'm a landlord, and the company that's under liquidation is my tenant. So obviously, they're undergoing the full process, so I won't be able to collect rentals and everything. But now they are still in occupation of my premises, and I want to have them vacated. What would one need to do in that circumstance?
Sure, Charlie. Melusi?
Okay, there are two options that I'm thinking of. The first one, which is the most immediate one, is that she starts an eviction process.
Okay.
No, she must send a notice to evict the tenant. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Then that process is obviously according to the fact that once she sends that eviction notice, it's going to be a long process. But she can also, if she can prove, she can make an urgent application that they vacate out of their premises, because it's a business, building, I would assume. And once this person stays there for maybe, because this process can take close to 12 months. So if she sees that it's going to take longer, she asks she does an urgent application, because it affects her business, the fact that the tenant is there. But also, let's say there's the second solution. Let's say maybe the tenant owes probably 100,000 rand of rent. She must make sure that during this liquidation process, she contacts the people who are involved, so that she can be also one of the creditors, so that when the assets have been obtained and they've been sold, whatever she can get from that liquidation process, she's one of the creditors, and she can be paid.
So how do you do that? How does Charlie identify herself?
Look, firstly, she must check at the Master of High Court, because the liquidation process has started. It's done at the Master of High Court, and it's of public record. She can get what you call. She can get information from that, and obviously, if she does get to know who's one of the creditors who's done this application that we spoke about at the beginning, she can work with them and find out, because she must also be there. And what happens is, when the liquidation process is being done, I know Natasha will also assist with that. There's an advertisement that is made to say this particular person or this particular company is being liquidated. If you are one of the creditors, this is a notice. You can also get into this process so that you can claim what is owed to you.
Charlie, I hope that gives you some insights.
No, it was quite clear. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And on that note, we're going to find out what's happening in the very latest Power headlines. It's 2:30. Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Good
they have
afternoon.
to put
News
it in
making
a
headlines at this
newspaper.
hour.
Yeah, I'm
Police
gonna
Minister
ask about
Pabi
that.
Yeah,
says
they
the
have to put it in
airport
the
space
newspaper.
and the
It's the same
Sandton
thing like
area
if your
will
company
be
gets
under heavy
deregistered.
police
You have to
scrutiny
also put
with
it
the
in the
start of
newspaper
BRICS
to
summit.
advertise, is anybody
Motorists have been
claiming this
urged to
company?
be
Is there
wary of
anything that's
various
going on?
closures
So it's a matter of
around the
public
island.
record.
To go and do the best for the country, the world, yourself,
Hey guys.
and all other people that should be our visitors. We command. Thank you very much.
Now, the News Defense Advocate in the Senzo Mayo murder trial, Zandile Mshololo, has argued that there is no one that can confirm that forensic officer Thabo Mosia kept exhibits collected from the crime scene in his allocated safe. This as Mosia testified that the evidence he collected from the Kumalo home was placed inside an office safe, as the exhibit clerk had already knocked off. He says for this reason, he only managed to book the exhibits the morning after they had been collected. However, Advocate Mshololo contests this, saying no one can attest to Mosia's version of events. Mshololo and another defense advocate, Zitulele Nxumalo, have sought to poke holes in how Mosia handled the exhibits and the crime scene.
There is no stock here. You kept the exhibits with. There is no person whom you handed over or was signed that you had received or you have control of the safe that you kept the exhibits.
I don't understand. When ke ka makgetlo ke hlalosa hore ha ke tloa crime scene ke fihlile mosebetsing and then re sebeditse di-hours tse ngata and really exhausted, re kgathetse. Only after maybe close to 4 or after exhibit tracker is sale. The only thing in nka etsa gore ke nke di-exhibit ke di bear inside my lockable safe, then ke di notelle hore hosane ke tlo di kenya mo registreng ya 4-5.
Bayanda's
I'll
Bondi
tell
will
you
have
guys about
more
it just
these
now.
and other stories at
That's a
3.
good question.
Power Talk.
I think we're going to talk about it just now.
We are told that the city
Tell me.
councillors of the city of
And I'll bring it up.
who
Tell
sit
me.
in that city
They're saying,
council,
how could we
some of
find
them
out when a
haven't paid
private
their
company
own
is
rates and
liquidating?
taxes.
So
And as
that's
a
part of
result,
this
the city of
advertisement
Johannesburg
Exactly.
is having to drop
Yeah.
their pay each
Oh, you're
month
live?
so that
Yeah,
they
I
get
just
Right.
got
I
on
like
now.
to watch
taxes paid
the
to
people
city.
live
And the
as
city thus far through
we're
that program
live.
of
Right, it
After
helps
You
with
Pay
the
has been
content as
able
well.
to
Absolutely.
recover
Yeah.
close on to
What's your
13.2
handle?
million rands
Tax with
from
Tash.
employees, including councillors,
How am I
who
not
were in
following it,
arrears
eh?
when it comes to their
That's
municipal
outrageous. I
bills.
apologize.
And
It's okay.
wonder shall never cease. Hey,
Tax with
hey,
Tash.
hey, 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 hey.
I got you.
You got me.
Weekdays, 9 a.m. to midday on Power 98.7.
Ballin Properties' new pricing is red hot and here to help you with their massive autumn
Ah,
savings.
yes.
In these tough times, you get your dream
That's so
apartment.
cool.
Ballin Properties is relaunching stunning 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments at the Blythe and Green Creek, Pretoria East. Show days on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Visit ballin.co.za today. T's and C's apply.
Okay.
Marketing is getting up close and personal at Africa's leading marketing conference, the Nedbank IMC. One day, over 20 top local and global thought leaders. If you are in the business of marketing and communication,
That could be cool.
you
Yeah.
can't afford to
Yeah,
miss
yeah,
this
that'd
year's
be fun.
conference. Friday,
Like a
15th
shared live.
September, in
That's
person
perfect.
or virtually, from wherever you are.
Hey, technology.
The IMC, and we'll be broadcasting live from the venue. Marketing, up close and personal.
Well, I mean, it looks ridiculous.
It invites all citizens and interested parties or organizations to attend a public hearing on transport bills and make their submissions and let their voice be heard. The public hearing will be held at Cosmos Center in Cosmos
Okay,
City
I'm just gonna put this on
at 9 a.m. For more information
I think
and to
you'd have to
request
press
copies of
mute.
the bills, please
Oh,
contact
that's what it
on
is.
smtiane@gbl.gov.za.
This is
Coming
such a good
up
idea.
in
I'd
the
never
next
thought of
hour.
this.
Power Drive with Tali Sokotane, 3 to 6 p.m. Tweet Pabi at Pabi Moloi and hashtag Power Lunch.
Yeah, we're live. We're absolutely live. And now we're live on all platforms. We're live on our Instagram as well. You can follow Tax with Tash on Instagram, and you can follow myself at Pabi Moloi as we take this conversation to you. If you are not able to join us on Power 98.7, on Pretoria 987, Joburg South and West 103.6, Vereeniging 104.4, and Ekurhuleni 107.2. This is Power 98.7. Now we're talking all about understanding the liquidation process in South Africa. Our segment is called Money Monday, and of course it's so important to be a good custodian of all that you earn, that you spend, that you do in your business, and that's exactly what our conversation is about. Tax specialist and founder of taxnownow.co.za, Natasha Lord, joins us, and on the line we have attorney and MD at Donda, attorneys Melusi Kulu, on the line. So Natasha and Melusi, before we went to the headlines, Melusi had talked a little bit about our callers needing to find out if the company that they're involved in or that they work with is being liquidated. So how does that advertisement process happen?
Okay, I mean, from my side that I know, it's really got to do with your newspapers that'll be alerted, and just like Melusi said, that's going to be a public record at the High Court. It is a tedious process. So when I think about things like implementation, it's something else. You know, it's something that it's not advertised, you know, greatly, that this company is going through a liquidation process or business rescue or anything like that. And hopefully the records that they have about you as a creditor are up to date. So if you have, you know, changed your number or your email, you might not get a circular that goes around. Sometimes they do email that. And there are certain protocols that need to be followed with regards to liquidation. But in this case with the lady, she obviously didn't get that that communique, and that just, you have to take it upon yourself. At least she knows the company is going through liquidation, and so she can kind of involve herself in the process, just like Melusi said. But yeah, you know, the integration of all of these things it's not the greatest.
Because we talk a little bit, you know, about a variety of things that need to be put out in a newspaper somewhere for public response or interaction, and it's on page 437, right at the bottom
And
left
who
corner.
reads newspapers?
And who reads newspapers? All right. So how do we get over that? How do we circumvent that?
Oh, from my side, I mean, in my experience, there's not really much that you can do. Luckily, with a lot of the people that I have communicated with, they have tried to reach out to people. They've done their best to call, to email, to SMS, to get records of, you know, what is outstanding, how many cents to the rand can we recoup from liquidating these assets, what can we come to a consensus about with regards to this, with the creditors coming to a consensus that this is how we can proceed.
Yeah.
If it's been accepted by the people being liquidated and so forth. But it's really, yeah, it is a bit difficult. I think maybe Melusi can speak on his experience. I haven't found anything easier so far, other than them
what do you think?
reaching out. Yeah.
Can you repeat, Pabi, the question?
Oh, just about, you know, the publication of the fact that the company is going under liquidation, being as an advertisement in the newspaper. How do we ensure that everybody who needs to see it sees it?
Well, it stays, the advertisement, I've just checked, it can stay for 30 days, not more than 60 days. But like you said, you know, it cannot be certain that one can be notified or easily be obtained. So I think the best way is just to ensure, once you confirm that there has been a process of liquidation, I think it's better to just go to court and have the information of the person that is being liquidated. And because it's a public record, you'll be able to get it. And then that's when you'll be able to see who are the parties that are involved. if you unfortunately don't see it being advertised on newspapers. Because like you said, it's underclassified, and the news that we want to read, we want to see what's in the front page.
Yes.
If you're a sports fan, you want to see if Kaizer Chiefs is winning or losing. So you don't have time to go to classify. So sometimes you miss it most of the time.
Very, very interesting. But I suppose it also just then speaks to the fact that perhaps we need to start making that a priority, just to peruse from time to time what's going on in those classifieds.
And I think when you do have a creditor that hasn't been paid, maybe that should be a question
Absolutely.
that you ask, because like you said, and they usually go for like the cheapest newspaper. You pay a small like 400 Rand to go put it in the classifieds. Out of all of that, to go and look every single time in one of the many publications to see if one of your creditors has advertised this is something else. So I would be pointed. I'd ask the question and I'd get that answer and then go directly to the High Court.
Yes, good afternoon, Lera and the team at last.
Welcome.
Yeah, man, you know what? I'm having a huge problem when it comes to the side of the employees. Since this engagement started, I hear there's nothing where the working force are prevailing on that system, of which is us as the working force, as the working mass. We succumb a huge exploitation, a different, we succumb a huge lack of inconsistency. We are not counting as the creditor. But once we found out the company, when it was doing right, we were already there on that company. When it's doing wrong, we'll be taking up. I've got the case like this.
So what I'm understanding is that the company that you were working for is under liquidation, and you then are out in the cold in terms of being compensated, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was liquidated, that company. But now the problem is the pending litigation. As us, we were already out. We were already out on that company. But during the course of the process, the case it was pending. We've got some of the colleagues who were inside of the company, but they didn't even get nothing now. But they have preferred the creditor, the master of court, preferring the big creditor rather than preferring all of us to be in a one umbrella.
Okay. All right. Let's get an answer for you. Melusi, maybe I can come to you first with what Manu had to say.
When this process happens, it's to ensure that there's a distribution of assets to pay off the liabilities. That's the first point. However, there is a way of saying there are preferred creditors, and those preferred creditors will be paid first. So the Labor Relations Act does also say what are the rights of the employees when the process happens. But it's just that when this process happens, there are preferred creditors. Like the gentleman was saying that it looks like they were not preferred, but you are there as well. You do become part of the conversation. I remember a few years back, I did do a similar case where I represented the employees, but we couldn't really, get the preference when it came to payment of their monies. And sometimes, unfortunately, it happens that the money may be finished before it comes to the former employees, depending on how many of them were there.
Do they have any legal recourse whatsoever?
Well, it all comes down to money, and if the money is no longer there, they will not get anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Natasha?
Yeah, the same thing. I mean, you have a specific way the liquidator will pay it out. Obviously, there's a consensus on how much per rand that they can actually allocate, and they'll try their best to satisfy as many debts as they can. But at the end of the day, SARS is foremostly going to come for what they want, and then you've got the bigger creditors who essentially weigh in because they're usually the ones who start the process, right?
Yes,
So they make sure that their paperwork, what they want out of creditors is going to at least recover whatever it is that they have lost in the process. And then, it's a matter of exposure to professional advice or services. Luckily, with Malusi, the people he was representing reached out to a lawyer. But that's money, that's time, that's a whole group of people.
I was going to ask, who pays for this process? Because the legal, wheels move very slowly, and it's quite costly.
Yeah, and that's why the creditors, to get to this point, is really like, okay, this is the best that we can do.
Yes.
We're really just going to kind of throw our weight on this and try and get what we want to get out of this, because we've done, the legal, the demands, and we've done the final demands and all of those things. But now we really need to get this money out of these people, and the only way is to really paint them into a corner to get their assets. But it is expensive, and how much you're going to receive out of everything is another conversation. How much it's going to be worth over the time that it takes to actually roll this out is another situation. And so I think exactly what Malusi is saying is to try and speak to the creditors to establish a going concern that they're happy with, and perhaps move it more towards a business rescue side of things than a liquidation type of thing.
So then what do we say to someone like Malulekane, who is in this position as an employee and is receiving nothing?
I feel like this is one of those cautionary tales that perhaps people feel, and it's not something you can just avoid altogether. But it's one of those cautionary tales where we think that employment is safe all the time, and it's not always safe. There's a risk to running a business, sure, and people know about that. They will always talk about, business is risky, business is up, business is down, but there is a very real risk when it comes to employment. This is one of them. Retrenchment is another one of them. There are many things that could happen to you as a person, and so this moves into more of the financial management side. Do you have something, maybe insurances that can protect you, income protection insurance, during a time like this where you're not fully out? So there are many things that can happen to a person, and so again, it's one of those things, 1,000 ways to die. And this is it when it comes to employment.
Oh man, Malulekane, I wonder what your thoughts are after what you've heard.
That's what I was trying to highlight.
Yeah.
The prominent part of that process is showing us those who are marginalized, like those working classes, etc. They ended up not getting nothing. Even if they're getting something, they will get the crumbs.
The crumbs,
but
absolutely.
All of the participation that is occurred inside of the working place is them. They are critical there, those vulnerable. But anyway, thanks for that. Now I know I'll explore that information to my counterpart and my co-workers.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing that aspect of this process to the fore in our conversation. The lines are open on 0861987000. You can also send us an X with the hashtag #PowerLunch or a voice note on 0833037093. So in my research, I found that shareholders are generally the last in line to receive any funds, as they're considered residual claimants. What does that mean? Talk to us about that.
Again, these are the people who were in charge of running this business, and so for them to be entitled to the foremost amounts that were there or reclaimed or could be liquidated, it just seems really unfair. And so that's legislated in that, look, you guys were meant to run this company. We've appointed a liquidator now who is going to essentially handle the distribution of what is left. And as a result of that, they're basically sidelined in the process in terms of the real quote-unquote decision making. This is now the liquidator and the creditors who are coming to a consensus of how can we best distribute and make these decisions. And so when we're talking about the shareholders, there, if there is anything left, then yeah, you can get something. Yeah, but what Malusi was saying is right. The possibility of there being more assets than liabilities getting to this point, it's really not. It's already there.
You were talking about some warning signs before you even get to the space where you have to consider liquidation. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. And like I said, characteristics don't exist siloed. They exist all over. You will probably find that the shareholders in charge of the running will probably have some sort of debt in their personal capacity. So, they're not going to have a great credit record. You're definitely going to have something from SARS. Are you actually meeting those are you satiating your creditors? Probably not. You're probably getting letters of demands and warnings, and that's also as a result of the more prominent function here, which is that your business model is broken. It's not working. You haven't actually gone to fix what is creating this chasm that is basically a sinkhole of your going concern. Your business doesn't just crash overnight. There are many details that come to play, and so it results in, these are all symptoms it results in you having to have something as extreme as liquidation, or maybe something as mild as being blacklisted, or even milder as you missing payments. It starts with that, and then it leads into something like you really just, this is unsalvageable, which is sad for me. I never enjoy seeing a business being unsalvageable. I had one case, and this is a point in case. I had a case. Brilliant business model, amazing business model, probably turning over 55 million a year. But they couldn't work together. It was a family-run business. They just could not work together. And the father was an older gentleman, and he didn't know what internet banking was, and he kept saying that the son was stealing money from him
by using internet banking.
And so he still wanted to do checks, and it was crazy. And they never got along, and he ended up treating the wife of the son very badly, and it was a real emotional element. And I think maybe this might give a three-dimensional view of why businesses can break down. And so it was a family-run business, great business model. They had contracts in place, things were going well, but they couldn't even come to a place where, they're turning over a couple of million a month, and now in this liquidation process, they have employed the one son at least to help with the business, and they're paying him 20,000 Rand a month from earning millions, simply because they can't come to a relational consensus on how to run the business. And it's family. And so that business just completely got liquidated. Great business model. It could have been a going concern, but they assessed who was going to run it. And so that's what led to its ultimate demise.
So that tells a lot about vetting the people you go into business with, be it family or not. And we've spoken on the show about going into business with your family and some of the pitfalls that you may find. But Melusi, maybe you can give us some advice when it comes to vetting who you start businesses with. What are some key points to keep in mind?
Well, I think it comes down to, obviously, you'll get like a credit report, but people are human beings, and maybe you'll find that they are solving their personal problems. But I think what is important is the issue of corporate governance as a company. How often are you going to meet as board of directors? What is your vision? What is your mission? What are your values? But most importantly, it's never noticed that, some of us who are still starting our companies and are hoping to grow them for the next decade, we don't really look at risk management as something that is important for our companies. So once you have a risk management committee, you are able to have, systems in place to see when your company or your systems will put you in danger. So I think that is what is important. And working together as a company, as shareholders and directors is important. So I think that you may start well, see a person's credit is proper, but what are your systems? What are your SOPs when you're working? And how will you make sure that everything is done properly? Because if you don't do that, and you don't know where you go with your business, and you're not united, and the story that Natasha was talking about is very sad, because she's talking about a family business that's making millions up to 20,000. It went down to 20,000 a month. So it all comes down to unity, and also ensuring that you have a risk management, kind of committee, so that you avoid these problems in future.
Absolutely. Okay, so once you've gone through all of the process, the decision to liquidate occurs, the insolvency practitioner is appointed, then assets are identified, creditors are dealt with and paid as far as possible, and the completion of the liquidation, which means what at the very end?
Basically, they've satisfied their debts. They've paid over the creditors, they've paid over SARS now, and then they've paid over the shareholders, and now they've kind of closed the case.
But the company then needs to be removed from the company's register.
Yeah. So that's the process that you will then start with CIP. Well, not start, but will end with CIPC. Yes. Basically removing it off of their database and, informing people, letting any notices go out to where they need to go out. Because, and the thing with CIPC is that it's ever changing. I mean, now we've had something like beneficial owners. So, for instance, if you have a company, but it's owned by someone who's maybe not a director or it's owned by a trust, you now need to disclose the full ownership of this company. And so we will probably see more of this, these disclosures being evolved, especially when it comes to things like with liquidation, because who else was involved that's maybe not on the company or has created a barrier between the two. I'd like to actually see how that plays out and if that gets kind of a backlash as well.
I mean, what kind of potential backlash could there be?
I mean, if you say, for instance, you have a trust, or you have a company that owns this company, if it's not appearing on, if you've kept documents out, and it's not appearing on CIPC, for all intensive purposes, you can kind of back away from this. You can distance yourself away. I'm not involved. Yeah. But now I wonder if there could be a potential overreach into any kind of beneficial owners that, and this will be interesting to see how it plays in trusts as well, crossing over those laws. I think it'll be an ongoing conversation with professionals, but what are the consequences now of these of beneficial ownership being so apparent, having to be registered on CIPC or else, facing legal consequences, and also how that impacts the whole process of liquidation. Who's to blame? What happens?
I'm curious then, Melusi, as we wrap up this conversation, you mentioned that it takes 10 years to then be rehabilitated. Talk to us about that process, if anything at all you can do to make the 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, and how then you can or cannot be involved in business during that time.
Okay. Maybe if I'll just backtrack a bit before I come to rehabilitation. I'm repeating it for the third time because I'm very passionate about this part. Once this process is, in the middle of the liquidation, I say find whatever way you can to find a solution because this 10-year thing can be a problem. But however, let's say the 10 years has started. You can ask before the 10-year period has ended that you become rehabilitated, but there can be certain conditions that you might have to fulfill. So it will depend on your situation. So it's not necessarily it's not necessary for the 10 years to come and end or for the period to lapse. So you can go before the 10 years, but obviously you have to have some conditions that you must satisfy to the Master of High Court.
Well, there we go. For more information, I suppose, finding specialists is absolutely important. Yeah. And from both of your points of view, from a legal and then from the tax implication point of view, how do we get hold of you, Natasha? What do you recommend?
I'm on all social media, TikTok, Instagram at Tax with Cash. I'm on LinkedIn at Natasha Lord. And then obviously we've launched our Tax Now program, which is to have these conversations, very casual conversations. It's a chat function, and you can basically get tax advice and tax guides. So it helps you actually file your taxes if you can't afford to speak to a specialist, but confidently. And so that's the Tax Now program, and we're always reachable there 24/7, which is great. And then, people can email me at natasha@lordbusiness.solutions, and any tax questions they have or business-related questions, they can obviously reach out to us.
We've got such a good question here from caveman_wa, but we've run out of time. So I'm going to screenshot that so that the next time we meet each other, then we can ask that question. Melusi, similar question to what I asked Natasha about who to consult and how do we find you?
Okay, you can find me on Melusi X at X for X-Men, and you can find our website www.donatedis.co.za. However, I must say that when your case is a bit complicated, make sure that you get someone who's insolvent practitioner. There are people who specialize basically on that part of the law.
Always very, very good advice, that as well. Sibulelo says this, Bulele Mbalo. Such valuable info for those who are already in business or for those who are aspiring into business in the future. And we will put this up as a podcast on our website, power987.co.za. So if you, like Spulela says, you came in halfway through the conversation, you can catch the other half as we podcast that. Thank you very much to both of our guests, Melusi Qulu, MD at Donda Attorneys and tax specialist and founder of taxnownow.co.za, Natasha Lord. And thank you for being a part of Power Lunch this afternoon. It truly has been a lot of very informative, important conversations, legalities of serving notice periods at work, buying property on auction, and this, our conversation about understanding the process of liquidation in South Africa. Stick around, the Power Drive team is about to take over the reins, but first, our 3 o'clock Power News.
This news bulletin is brought to you